For decades, Ron Howard was seen as untouchable, the calm one, the polite one, the smiling symbol of Hollywood stability, while others spiraled into scandals, addictions, and public collapses. Ron Howard stood there untouched, or at least that's what everyone believed. Perfect career, perfect image, zero cracks. But perfection has a cost. And the truth is, the cracks were always there. They were just buried deep, under discipline, silence, and a lifetime of learning how to never let the world see him break. For years, Ron said nothing. He let the myth speak for him until suddenly everything changed. After the devastating loss connected to Rob Reiner, something inside Ron shifted. The industry froze, the headlines exploded. But Ron Howard did something nobody expected. He started talking, not with polished Hollywood answers, not with safe, rehearsed reflections, but with raw honesty. And when he finally spoke, people realized this story was never just about success. It was about pressure, about childhood stolen by cameras, about silent rivalries, and about a lifetime spent holding everything together while slowly suffocating inside. Because long before Ron Howard became a legendary director, he was just a child raised inside a system that never stopped demanding more. Born into an acting family, Ron didn't chase fame. Fame chased him. His parents, actor Rance Howard and actress Jean Spiegel Howard, created a home where creativity thrived, but discipline ruled. There was love, yes, but also expectations, structure, pressure. By the time most children learned how to play, Ron was learning how to perform. At just 18 months old, he appeared on the screen. And by the late 1950s, his childhood was already gone. Playgrounds were replaced by sound stages, bicycles replaced by scripts, school lunches replaced by studio tutors hovering just outside the frame. Years later, Ron would describe it with one haunting phrase: a golden cage, safe but lonely. Then, in 1960, everything exploded. At just 6 years old, Ron Howard became America's child through The Andy Griffith Show. Millions welcomed him into their homes every week. He became the face of innocence, trust, and comfort. But behind the smile was a quiet boy doing homework in tiny rooms. While laughter echoed from outside, fame looked warm on screen. But up close, it was cold. His father tried to protect him with one rule that shaped his entire life: never act cute, just act honest. That lesson stayed with Ron forever. But honesty didn't erase the pressure. It just taught him how to hide it better. And while Ron was growing up under constant scrutiny, another child was being shaped by the same machine: Rob Reiner. Different personality, different energy, but the same spotlight, the same expectations, the same invisible weight pressing down year after year. Two boys growing up fast, two futures being molded before they even understood who they were. And those early scars never truly healed. They just learned how to smile through them. By the time The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron was only 14 years old, but emotionally, he was already exhausted. 8 seasons, 8 years of living inside a world that wasn't real, 8 years of being watched, judged, adored, and frozen in time. His education was split between classrooms and sound stages. Lunch wasn't with friends his age, it was with crew members and legends twice his age. Kind people, supportive people, but not peers. That isolation didn't look dramatic. It was quiet, subtle, the kind that settles into you slowly and never fully leaves. One moment captured it perfectly. During the filming of The Music Man, a young Ron froze during a dance scene. The cameras were rolling, the room was watching, and suddenly the pressure collapsed in on him. "I can't do it," he whispered. The crew quietly adjusted. Scenes were worked around him. The audience would never know. What they saw was confidence. What existed behind the scenes was fear, expectation, and a child barely holding himself together. That experience wasn't unique. It was routine. And while Ron learned how to manage that pressure by becoming calm, controlled, and agreeable, Rob Reiner learned to push back differently, louder, sharper, more confrontational, two survival strategies shaped by the same machine. As Ron entered his late teens, he thought the hardest part was over. It wasn't. In 1974, happy days arrived. At just 19 years old, Ron once again became America's favorite boy, this time as Richie Cunningham. Polite, loyal, safe, familiar. The role was a massive success and a massive trap. While the world around him changed, politics, culture, rebellion, Richie stayed frozen in nostalgia, and so did Ron. By his early 20s, he was still pretending to be a teenager on screen, while real life passed him by. People his age were questioning authority, protesting wars, and discovering who they were. Ron was stuck. He felt invisible behind the character, like he was living someone else's life while his own stayed on pause. Quietly, that realization became unbearable. He asked for one thing, just one storyline that reflected reality, something touching the Vietnam War, something honest, something real. The answer came back fast. No, that rejection didn't explode. It sank. And in that silence, Ron finally understood the truth he had been avoiding since childhood. If he stayed in front of the camera, he would never fully own his voice. So he made a decision that would change everything. He stepped behind the camera, not because he dreamed of directing, but because it was the only way to breathe. Directing wasn't ambition, it was escape. And in that moment, his path quietly began to mirror Rob Reiner's once again. Two men shaped by childhood fame, two actors realizing the system loved freezing people in time, both searching for control, both searching for truth, both trying to finally tell stories instead of becoming one. But control, as Ron would soon learn, comes with its own dangerous price. Freedom came disguised as a gamble. In 1977, Ron Howard accepted a deal that sounded reckless on paper. Roger Corman offered him a choice: star in a low-budget, chaotic film, eat my dust, and in return, earn the right to direct his own movie. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about the status, it was about control. That gamble turned into Grand Theft Auto, a film co-written with his father, Rance Howard. The budget was barely $62,000. They destroyed nearly 70 cars. The shoot was wild, messy, unpredictable, and somehow it worked. The film made millions. Hollywood noticed. For the first time, Ron felt something acting never gave him: ownership. From that moment on, directing became addictive. Each project pulled him deeper: Night Shift, Splash, Cocoon, Willow, Parenthood. Every success raised his status. Every win increased the expectations, silently following him everywhere. Studios didn't just trust him, they leaned on him, and Ron responded the only way he knew how: by giving everything. While others demanded attention loudly, Ron stayed composed, precise, relentless, calm on the surface, obsessive underneath. Just like Rob Reiner, he had escaped being frozen in time, only to step into a spotlight that burned even hotter. Then came Apollo 13. This wasn't just another film, it was a mission. Ron chased realism with near obsession. No shortcuts, no fake drama. Mission Control was rebuilt using real NASA panels bought for $1 each. Over 600 zero-gravity sequences were filmed, each lasting only seconds. Every switch, every movement, every detail had to be perfect. Ron worked 18-hour days for months. Sleep disappeared. Rest became optional until one morning, the body pushed back. Production stopped. The crew waited. When Ron returned, pale but focused, something unexpected happened. The entire team greeted him wearing shirts that read Mission Control. It was their way of saying, "We've got you." That moment stayed with him because for the first time, Ron understood something dangerous. Passion had crossed a line. Perfection had a cost. And chasing brilliance could quietly pull you away from yourself. It was a lesson Rob Reiner had faced in his own way too. Two creators driven by the same fire, learning how easily dedication turns into isolation. That realization never left Ron. And when life later delivered loss, fear, and reflection, it all came rushing back. Because even at the peak of his career, Ron Howard was carrying a truth he could no longer ignore. Success meant nothing if it cost the people he loved most. From the outside, Ron Howard's life looked flawless. A powerful career, creative control, respect from every corner of Hollywood, and then a family. By the early 1990s, Ron had everything he had worried for. He was married to Cheryl, grounded, supportive, and deeply patient. They were building a life that felt real, far from the artificial worlds Ron had grown up inside. Then came fatherhood, a moment that should have slowed everything down. Instead, it tested everything. In 1991, Ron faced a decision that would quietly haunt him for years. A major production required a 6-month shoot in Ireland. On paper, it was another step forward, another achievement. In reality, it was the moment ambition and family collided head-on. Ron convinced himself he could manage both, that the sacrifice was temporary, that it would all balance out in the end, so he left. Cheryl stayed home, holding everything together. Newborn twins, exhaustion, endless responsibility, while Ron disappeared into brutal weather, rewrites, studio pressure, and endless days on set. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself it was worth it. But distance has a way of telling the truth. When Ron finally returned home, the silence said everything. The house felt unfamiliar. The warmth felt distant. Something had shifted. And then came the moment that shattered him. His baby daughter didn't recognize him. No smile, no reaction, no connection. Just a stranger standing in front of her. That was the second Ron Howard broke. Years later, he admitted that moment destroyed the illusion he had lived inside for decades. The belief that success could justify absence, that love could wait. It couldn't. No award could replace missed time. No praise could fix emotional distance. That day, Ron made a quiet promise to himself, to his family, never again. But promises are easier made than kept. In 2005, during the exhausting reshoots of Cinderella Man, the old habits returned. Sleepless nights, endless decisions, the pressure to deliver perfection once more. Months passed. Life moved on without him. And when he came back, his children hadn't just grown taller, they had grown into moments he would never get back. That realization cut deeper than any critical failure ever could. Ron finally faced the truth planted deep in his childhood acting days. He had always believed he had to say yes, had to overdeliver, had to prove himself again and again. That belief built his legacy and nearly destroyed what mattered most. As Ron slowed down, something else began weighing heavily on him, something far more frightening than deadlines or expectations. Family. Because while Ron was learning how to be present, Life was preparing a new test he could not direct, rewrite, or control. Long before awards, before power, before control meant anything, there was Clint. To the world, Clint Howard was a familiar face, unforgettable, quirky, always appearing where you least expected him. But to Ron, Clint was something far more important. He was the only person who truly understood. They didn't just grow up together, they grew up inside the same machine, side by side on neighboring sound stages, passing each other in hallways filled with cables, heat, and pressure. Two kids earning paychecks before they could spell their names. When fame felt overwhelming, Clint was there. When silence felt heavy, Clint understood it without explanation. That shared childhood came Ron's quiet anchor. In an industry obsessed with perfection, Clint reminded Ron of who he was before expectations took over, before control, before fear. But as Ron rose, Clint fought quieter battles. By the late 1980s, things began to spiral. Pressure, judgment, the exhaustion of being known but never fully seen. Ron watched helplessly as his brother drifted further away. In 1990, Ron finally drew a line, one sentence: no anger, pure love, get help, or lose me forever. It was the hardest thing Ron had ever said, and it worked. Clint chose recovery, chose life, and that decision saved him. Years later, the brothers spoke publicly about that moment, crediting brutal honesty and unbreakable loyalty. Proof that love, when pushed hard enough, can still pull someone back. But decades later, fear returned, a different kind. Clint began facing a serious health battle. Ron never shared details, but his voice said enough. This wasn't something he could fix or control. For a man built on preparation and precision, this shattered the illusion completely. Ron couldn't yell, "cut." He couldn't rewrite the ending. He couldn't protect his brother the way Clint once protected him when fame felt too heavy. And for the first time, Ron admitted something shocking. He wasn't afraid of critics. He wasn't afraid of failure. He wasn't afraid of losing relevance. He was afraid of losing his brother. That fear changed him. Friends noticed it, the way he slowed down, the way he listened more, the way silence no longer scared him. And that pain reshaped how he reacted when news about Rob Reiner surfaced. Because Rob wasn't just a peer, he was a mirror, loud where Ron was quiet, fearless where Ron was careful, driven by the same fire, haunted by the same past. And when Rob's story turned tragic, it didn't just hurt, it clarified everything. By the time the news surrounding Rob Reiner broke, Ron Howard was already worn thin. Not by deadlines, not by critics, but by fear. Fear for his brother, fear of time slipping away, fear that control, something he had built his entire life around, was nothing more than an illusion. Rob's story hit him differently than anyone expected, because Rob wasn't just another name in Hollywood history. He was a reflection. Where Ron was measured, Rob was explosive. Where Ron calculated every move, Rob charged forward. Where Ron stayed quiet, Rob filled rooms with fire. They weren't enemies, they were mirrors. For decades, they moved on parallel paths, never colliding, never fully closing the distance, respect mixed with rivalry, admiration tangled with restraint, each pushing the other without ever saying it out loud. And now, the conversation was over. That realization crushed Ron in a way no professional loss ever had. In interviews, his voice changed, slower, softer, unprotected. He didn't talk about films, he didn't talk about awards. He talked about love, about family, about how fast everything can disappear. There's no script for moments like this, he said quietly. For the first time in his life, the man known for control had none left. Already carrying fear for Clint, Rob's story stacked a loss on top of loss, a brutal reminder that life doesn't care how careful you are or how prepared. And then came the regret, not loud, not dramatic, quiet. Ron replayed old moments, missed conversations, unspoken respect, thoughts he assumed there would always be time to say later. When asked directly about Rob, Ron paused. Then he said one sentence that revealed everything. We didn't always agree, but he made me better. Maybe I never told him that. That was it. No polish, no performance, just truth. Two storytellers shaped by the same childhood pressure, the same spotlight, the same hunger for meaning, each trying to say the same thing, just in different languages. As the headlines moved on, Ron didn't. Friends say he began writing quietly, not a blockbuster, not a studio project, something personal, something unfinished. When asked if it was about Rob, Ron only smiled. It's about losing the one person who understood you, even when you didn't always understand each other. That line landed harder than any tribute ever could, because beneath the rivalry, beneath the distance, there was recognition. And in that recognition, Ron finally allowed himself to say what he had spent a lifetime holding back. Legacy isn't perfection, it's connection. And sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who understand us best. By the time Ron Howard turned 70, something inside him had changed for good. Not quietly, not gradually, but fundamentally. For decades, Ron had been telling everyone else's stories, shaping meaning, controlling chaos, finding perfect endings for fictional lives. Yet somehow, his own story had remained unfinished. Slowing down didn't feel natural at first. It felt wrong. In an industry that rewards momentum, stepping back can feel like disappearing. But Ron wasn't afraid of that anymore, because after everything, after fear, regret, and loss, he finally understood what no award ever taught him. Time is the only thing you never get back. He began turning down projects, not because he couldn't do them, but because he didn't want them to take something else away. His days became quieter, more intentional, less driven by proving anything. Family dinners mattered more than premieres. Presence mattered more than praise. And the shift didn't come from success. It came from loss, from watching his brother struggle with things he couldn't control, from realizing how close he came to losing the people who mattered most, from understanding that his rivalry with Rob Reiner was never about competition. It was about recognition. They were chasing the same truth. One loudly, one quietly. Two boys shaped by childhood fame. Two men searching for meaning inside a system that rarely stops to care. When Ron finally spoke openly, fans weren't shocked that he struggled. They were shocked that he carried it all alone for so long. At an anniversary celebration marking 50 years with his wife Cheryl, Ron stood in the place where their story began. No cameras chasing a spectacle, no performance. And he said something that stunned everyone listening. He would trade every award, every hit film, every accolade, just to get back the time he lost with his children. That was the clearest truth of his life. At 71, with a legacy secured beyond question, Ron Howard finally said out loud what the industry never encourages anyone to admit. None of it matters if the people you love start slipping away. Rob Reiner's story wasn't just a loss. It was a warning, a mirror, a lesson delivered too late, but still powerful enough to change everything. And that's where this story truly ends. Not with closure, but with clarity. Because legacy isn't perfection, it's connection. And sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who understand us best, even when we never quite find the words in time.